Thank you for inviting me to the program.
All right, thanks.
All right.
Great to have you on. So first of all, tell us your take, your view about the local movie industry, especially for the Indonesian movies that we are currently seeing more of throughout the past several years.
Well, yeah, as you mentioned earlier in the opening, that we already saw some kind of increase in the film industry in Indonesia in general. So so many improvements in several levels, especially if you look at the number of audience in 2000, number of ticket sales. In 2017, we got around 37 million ticket sales. But in 2019, it rose into 51 million ticket sales. And many of Indonesians' film have already gained trust from the audience. They can even compete with the big Hollywood blockbusters, even the superhero films from Marvel Cinematic Universe. So you can imagine how strong we were before the pandemic hit. And we have some interesting titles as well, as shown here on the screen. Dilan 1919 and Dilan 1991. I have some reservation to the films, but you can see how they gain 6 million audience since 6 million ticket sales. And Dilan is not the first one. We also have the Warkop Reborn a few years back. Which also managed to sell 6 million tickets to the audience. So this is something very strong as a foundation for Indonesian film industry to grow. And we have to mention that it's because the regulation that took place a few years back when President Jokowi took out the film industry from a negative list of investment. So yeah, in general, we were in a very, very strong foundation for the film industry to grow, I can say.
Right. Now, another title that has garnered a lot of attention from audience is KKN di Desa Penari, which within 6 days of its release managed to reach 2 million viewers and make it as one of the best-selling Indonesian movie during the pandemic. Now, what do you think about that? Is it a sign that Indonesian movies are starting to dominate the market in Indonesia? Now, you mentioned we are actually even good compared to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, you can see it back in 2016. I think it's 2016 when we have the Ada Apa Dengan Cinta 2. They were head-to-head with Captain America Winter Soldier. And actually, the Ada Apa Dengan Cinta surpasses the numbers of ticket sales compared to the Winter Soldiers. So that was the thing that makes us quite optimistic about the future of the film industry in Indonesia back then. And well, the pandemic hit and many films suffered from, well, the industry in general suffered from the pandemic. And one of the films that have to postpone the release is KKN di Desa Penari. The film, the title was already viral in Twitter when the stories was released. The story was released on Twitter. It was a unique stories. It was a novel, but it's released bit by bit in Twitter, and it gained very good tractions, inviting avid readers for the story. And because of the hit, the producer MD Pictures put so many investments in the film. They really want the film to have a big platform in terms of numbers of screens, and the production itself. The production value is really good, and the film have to be postponed for 2 years because of the pandemic, because they don't want to release it in the middle of the pandemic, in the peak of the pandemic. So they postpone it for 2 years, and it's also creates some kind of hype But this is not a standalone phenomenon. I have to say, because we have a few titles also thriving during the pandemics. We have the Kukira Kau Rumah. They managed to get more than 2 million audience for 15 days of screening. And we also have Makmum 2, Makmum 2, the sequel. They also managed to get 1.7 million audience ticket sales during the pandemic. So in general, Indonesians still love Indonesian films. That's for sure. And I think KKN di Desa Penari has gained so much benefit, so much advantage from that.
Yeah, and I think it's timing is everything. And the last 2 years have been so unpredictable. You don't know if when you release something. I mean, it could just be bad timing. You release something, and then suddenly there was somewhat of a lockdown, and people couldn't go to theaters. Or you release something, and people are just going back to the theaters. So you have much more crowds coming out. But one thing that's not a coincidence is, Mas Eric, during the pandemic, many Indonesian films that were released competed internationally and were recognized, such as Uni or Seperti Dendam Rindu Harus Dibayar Tuntas, even Penyalin Cahaya or Photocopier. So what do you think has made this kind of latest phenomenon happen? Is it because, like you said, the production quality in Indonesian films in general are just getting better and now just being recognized? Or is it because we have much more digital platforms that can reach people around the world now? Or is it just because the international film community is just now recognizing films from every part of the world? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's part of the part of that what we gained from the investment some times ago. I mean, I'm talking about the increase in the production value in general. Indonesian filmmakers are well known for their creative ability in amidst the difficult situations, in the lack of infrastructure, so to speak. Even when during the crisis, Indonesian filmmakers managed to produce good films with little support from the government and from the private sectors as well. But now, as you see, that the government has already put so much support, so many forms of support to Indonesians filmmakers, and looking at the quality, it's really growing, I can say. The title that you've mentioned, like Uni, Seperti Dendam, they won accolades in big platform, in big festivals, the Class A festivals, so to speak. Toronto and Locarno, they are one of those big festivals, international festivals, and I think that's a very international audience also, especially film programmers and critics. They're looking forward for something new. They're looking forward always to explore new possibilities. And Indonesian cinemas, Indonesian films, Indonesian titles have provided them that, provided the new possibilities, especially like Edwin's film, Seperti Dendam, which for some people have quite a unique storytelling, very strong visuals, and very expressive at the same time, talking about a very brave subject, sex and impotence and masculinity. So critics and programmers are looking forward to have those types of expressions in the world of cinema, and yeah, I think that works very well for Indonesian filmmakers.
Right. Now, if we see the trends, those titles that we talk about that won accolades and went on to international film festival are also the titles that garnered a lot of audience in our home country. But just curious, from your perspective, what kind of movies do Indonesians actually like to watch?
Well, we can say that those titles are not, super popular in Indonesia, even though Uni is performed quite well. in the cinema because the drama, I think, relates to many people. But Indonesian still loves to see films that makes them a kind of escape from the reality easily. So to put it bluntly, to put it brutally simple, horror films and tearjerkers drama still loved by Indonesians. Like KKN di Desa Penari is actually a horror film. So there's a strong fundamental for horror films to gain big viewerships in Indonesia. So yeah, I think that's why you can see that the films like not only KKN di Desa Penari but also Joko Anwar's film Pengabdi Setan and Impetigo. What's the Indonesian title for that? I forgot. But yeah, those are films that perform quite well in the movie theater.
Yeah, and I think we'll always be fascinated with the world of the supernatural. Always the movies tend to draw it that way. So, obviously a lot of Indonesian filmmakers, as we mentioned, have experienced international recognition, local success as well. What do you think still lies ahead challenge-wise for Indonesian filmmakers?
As you know, that the Indonesian films industry always cautious about the future, even though we have a few titles that manage to thrive in the box office to gain more than 4 million. The psychological threshold for a film to be considered a success was 1 million audience, 1 million ticket sales. But now I think after we saw Dilan and Warkop, we expect to have more audience. 6 million is the new benchmark for any films to get, to be called as a massive success in Indonesia. And everyone wants to have that type of films, the film that can garner more than 5 or 4 million ticket sales. So this is still a challenge to constantly having film in that quality in terms of production and also the audience support. There's no single recipe for that. And one thing that quite challenging, I think, for the industry is the quality of the creative talents. We have so many creative talents, but it is not enough for the current production. Now we have around 120 titles released a year, but if you look at the numbers of good script writers, maybe not so many. If you look at the editors, not so many good editors in Indonesia to cater the needs of the growing industry. And also, don't forget the sound recorders and sound manager, for example. We have a serious lacks of numbers for the sound engineers in Indonesian film industry. It's an opportunity for creative talents to go into that field, and to master the skill. Nowadays, we are survived with the current talents, but we need more good talents, especially for the ones who have the good technicalities and also to be able to execute the concepts. It's not only about the concept, but how to make it happen on screen. That's really the challenge still for Indonesian film industry.
Right. Now, you mentioned that the movie industry was stopped to a halt during the pandemic. Now it seems that COVID-19 restrictions are easing. What do you think the movie industry will be like after the pandemic?
It's difficult to predict, but I think Indonesian filmmakers can build on top of the success. We see that some films are now on the pipeline for production. and as we see that the numbers of audience can reach more than 1 million. So there's a slight optimism if we talk about the movie theaters ticket sales for Indonesian film industry. But also don't forget to have that we also have streaming service. The Indonesian film industry call it OTT, over the top. Even though it's just make 10% of the movie sales in general, but now filmmakers have already diversified their product. They still need to maintain the overhead costs for the operations, and they use this platform. They use this video platform as some kind of to contribute to the operations. But they still need to have big films, big titles to invite the audience, to gain trust from the audience, and that's still a big challenge, I think, for the film industry now.
Well, since we're talking all about films, Mas Eric, and it is the weekend, we'd like you to help give us and our audience your 3 movie recommendations for us to binge over this next couple of days. Indonesian films only, since we've been talking about local films. So go ahead, in no particular order.
Of course. You mean the recommendation for this weekend?
Yeah, sure. And your top 3 that you would recommend for us to watch.
Okay. For the time being, of course, you can see the KKN di Desa Penari in the cinema. I think you will have a quite interesting experience. But there are also some smaller titles that I think might interest you. I fancy these titles. They are available in the streaming service. One is called Aum. Aum. It's a story. It's a documentary about filmmaking back in early 2000s during the Reformasi, very political films. And another one is a documentary called You and I from Fani Khotimah. It's a story about the survivors of 1965 massacre in Indonesia. Very interesting and very touching story. It's not about the atrocities itself, but it's about resilience, survival, hope, and love between 2 friends that survived from the massacres. Those 2 friends are women, and they take care of each other. It's very touching and very, very beautiful film.
That sounds humanizing as well. Well, Mas Eric, thank you. I love documentaries, by the way. We always talk about it all the time. Sometimes movies, they go a little bit too out there for me. Sometimes I want something more real. Documentaries are the way to go. So thank you for your recommendations, Mas Eric.
No worries. No worries. Thank you.
Mas Eric, stay safe.
All right, have yourself a great weekend.